the people that are getting into power these days in the United States and in the world, and even they're starting to make decisions, are millennials and Gen Zers. And we grew up with the internet, or we started to grow up with the internet. And the internet is a place for quick answers and finding exactly what you need in the blink of an eye. And some answers don't come that quickly. And so I just wish that people would take some time to think for themselves and listen to other people, because you may not always be right. And that mentality set me back about 10 years.
Welcome back to the Better Than Rich Show. I am going to be with an unbelievable guest today, Derek Clifford. And he is one of the most successful multifamily real estate investors we've had on the show. He's a fund manager, an author, and a podcaster. What's kind of cool is he has retired himself from his full-time corporate job, and we get into this. By leveraging business systems and delegation and whatnot, he controls over 400 apartment units with over $50 million in assets under management. He has a podcast called The 3 Degrees of Freedom. I will be invited to be a guest on that show, which I'm excited about. So you can check out on us flipping the script there. But he has his first book, Part-Time Real Estate Investing for Full-Time Professionals. He has built unbelievable success with time freedom and location freedom, financial freedom. He's the epitome of what it means to be better than rich and having being time rich in his life. We get into a lot of the background story. We get into some specifics on how he's done that. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation on the Better Than Rich Show with Derek Clifford. Welcome to the Better Than Rich Show with your hosts, Andrew Biggs and Mike Abramowitz. The Better Than Rich Show helps ambitious leaders who are on a mission to leave the world better than they found it, change their perspective on what's important, increase their income and impact, and systemize their life and business. If you've ever struggled with finding your purpose, have felt disconnected or distracted, or found yourself going through the motions, this show will remind you that what you do matters and will re-inspire you to chase your highest dreams. It's time for you to become better than rich. Welcome back to the Better Than Rich Show. I'm your host today, Mike Abramowitz. I'm here with Derek Clifford. Derek, welcome to the Better Than Rich Show.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I know we were just talking before we got started. Adam Zock is a good friend of mine, and he was an episode on our podcast, and it got a lot of really great feedback because he was talking about real estate investing, and he quit his W-2 as an engineer and was able to go full-time into real estate investing. And then I look at your bio and I'm like, what? This is going to be a great conversation. And I would like to start with, this is like the ultimate goal for many listeners that are stuck in a W-2. I say stuck, I use that loosely, or stuck in a career path that maybe that's like not as fulfilling or rewarding as they want. And seeing some of our guests come on the show and say, hey, I was kind of like in this stuckness in this career path, but I was able to free myself from that using cash flow vehicles. Your vehicle, similar to Adam's, has been real estate. So I'd like to start with 2.5 years ago when you left the W-2, and then we can obviously to explore what you were doing in that W-2 and then why your reasons were for transitioning. But I think it's really cool that you left the W-2, traveled, lived in Europe for 4 months, Japan for 3 months, and your wife was able to work remote during that time frame while having this portfolio of 500 multifamily units and managing all this remotely. Super impressive. And I'd love for you to why don't you just walk us through, how did you, what was that experience like? So that way we can start with, this is what it's like to run a remote operation and travel with your wife. And then we could take it back a little bit and go to the origin story.
Well, yeah. So thanks, Mike. First of all, I think being able to travel, it's a privilege and we don't take it lightly. It's something that we have worked really hard towards and was very intentional about for about a good 5 years. And if I were to be honest with you, I would say that COVID was probably the most important catalyst for all of this, because at the time I was working a full-time job leading into us leaving. And what ended up happening was, once COVID hit, I was able to start to work remotely. And we started to ask some of these bigger questions, which was, like um, if we had the ability to choose this house that we're living in the greater San Francisco Bay Area, would we have rebought that house again, knowing that we have complete location freedom now? Because both Sophie and myself, we both have location freedom. So, she works remotely and now I work remotely with my W-2. Would we choose this house in this situation to get in again? And the answer to that was actually no. So what we ended up doing, Mike, was around that time, we sold our house and we took the capital gains from that property and we basically invested it into joint ventures. We were already doing multifamily and everything, but we invested into a few joint ventures and said, okay, let's just go ahead and keep our money working, because usually a primary residence is a great place, especially if it's in a good area, for your money to work for you. But we decided that we're going to take some of that money and put it into rental property, because we've already done that for many, many years, and let it work. And then we can take some of the cash that we had from our sale, plus the income from our W-2s and from our cash flowing real estate, and start traveling around. And the funny thing is, Mike, is that when you're used to living in the Bay Area and you had a $10,000 mortgage, right, on a property, and you're trying to pay that, and you're basically using all of your income to try to pay off your mortgage or just try to stay above water. It turns out you can do a lot of living in the rest of the United States for like $4,000 or $5,000 a month. And that happened to be what our rental income was already at from some of our rental properties. But when we were living in the Bay, our goal was much higher because the expenses were much higher, right? So what ended up is we just started driving around, the country. We had to stay within California for my job at the time. So we were in, Yosemite, we were in Big Bear, so for those who aren't familiar with California, it is a very big place. There's a lot to visit. There's a lot to see there. Lake Tahoe, up north, like in wine country, down in Palm Springs. There's a lot of places to go, and I'm very fortunate, to be in California and be able to travel within California with my W-2. But then, I started asking bigger questions, Mike. It's like, do I want to be confined to California? Do I want to be confined to my W-2? And eventually, with COVID, like the other surprise was that all of the rental activity and like all of our rental properties started exploding. And that's when we decided to double down into it. And I made the tough decision to leave the W-2. So while I was traveling around the country, I decided, we got to really take this seriously. And so, because I was always going to regret it, I was always going to be like, if I didn't have a chance to go into and do my own thing, then, I would be always asking these questions about what would happen what if. And we made the jump. We exited the W-2, and working with my personal coaches and working with my wife to help reassure me, because I'm very much a detail and process oriented person, especially at that time. I was always worried about the cash flow situation, right? Because yes, we had cash flowing real estate, but what happens if an AC goes out, or if there's a fire, or if something like that happens? Like, it would interrupt. We wouldn't have the safety or the blanket of a W-2 behind us to help us, right? So, we worked through that, and eventually I just left my W-2 and started traveling around the country. And before you ask, I know you're going to ask this, like, how do we manage our properties while I'm traveling, or while both my wife and I are traveling in Europe and, around the rest of the country? The way we do that is that we partner with amazing people who are in the markets that we invest in. And that's why we only invest in those markets, because we have established relationships with people that I've known for over 5 to 10 years. That are both flippers. They know who they can reach out to for alternate contacts in case things go wrong, or if our property manager starts going off the rails, right? So we have boots on the ground ownership that we partner with in all of these locations. And then I do all the things that I can do remotely, which is raising capital, doing the underwriting, putting the loans together, talking with the brokers, doing all of that while traveling remotely. So that's maybe just a little bit of a slice. And then just last thing I'll say before I pitch it back to you is that I counted this up just the other day, we've been in over 70 different Airbnbs, because we stay in average about, we'd stay maybe 2 to 3 weeks each in an Airbnb. And that's our living situation. We don't have any property tax bills. We don't have any trash bills or utility bills. That's all rolled into the expense of being in an Airbnb. But we get to be in these wonderful places And we have a mobile studio, right? So I'm talking to you from a Lumina camera, and we have like the light, the light stands that you can travel and carry with you, and we have this awesome microphone, and all of that stuff fits in, and it's just part of the lifestyle, right? And thank goodness that my wife is very much on board with this, because if she wasn't, then this is going to be a completely different conversation. So that's a little bit about my life and kind of where we're at right now.
Well, very, very fascinating. I have several follow-up questions for you. So we're going to go in a few different directions here, listener. So I'm going to be asking some tactical. So if Derek is willing to play along, we might be able to pull out of him some really good wisdom and nuggets that you can do some tactical stuff. Because my first immediate question came in. It's like, okay, if you're working a W-2, but you said, oh, we already had real estate, like in a very like small little sidebar. I think there's some people that are listening that might say, well, I would like to have that little bit of real estate experience while I'm working my current job. How the heck did you do that? Do you have, what's the origin story of getting into real estate? Me, I got into real estate. You look like a young guy. I mean, I got in real estate in probably the worst time in history. I bought my first house in 2006, and then I had 3 properties by 2007. And then the market collapsed and I lost the properties. I lost $130,000 of my own money. I had a 400 credit score and I was belly up. So I worked the next 10 years to try to repair. And now, as a accredited investor with a high 700 credit score, with now like investing and stuff, I'm like, man, that was a very expensive lesson that I learned in my early 20s. And you're like, yeah, no, I just got I had a couple. We had already had some properties while I was working, my job and stuff. So, can you guys just take us back for a moment to the first investment property? Because there are some people listening. They're like, man, I'd really like to buy it. And with what you know today, compared to what you did do, like how does that compare? What are the things that in the previous market compared to the current market? What would you do the same? What would you do different? I really love to hear your perspective on that. And why I asked that question, listener, just so you know, is I asked this question to Rachel Richards. She was on the show. She has been able to create passive income to retire before she was 30 years old on real estate. I asked this question to Chris Larson on the show. He has the Next Level Income podcast. So this is a really relevant question. Kyle Reedstrom, who has passive 25K. So it's a question I like to ask. You could go back and hear their responses, but I'd really love to hear what Derek's response is as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for that. So, to answer your question, in regards to getting started with real estate while working a full-time job or having a business, you have to use whatever it is your unfair advantage. And I think that when I was working my W-2, my unfair advantage was the fact that I had a really high salary in the Bay Area. And when I got started investing in real estate, I first went to some meetups, right? And I first tried to understand where were people investing, and could I build a community of people around me that I could bounce ideas off of to try to, figure out where to go. And inside the Bay Area, there were plenty of people who were, get this, Mike, this is what they were doing. They were using their home equity in their house, right? Because in the California Bay Area, there's lots of home equity. People at the time, back in, 2006, about the same time that you were talking, right? 2006, 2008. And then even in 2012, 2011, just when we really got started with all of this. At that time period, people had equity in their homes that had gone up, right? Or they started to go up in that time. And what people were doing is they were taking their $1 million homes and shaving out like maybe $80, $90, $100,000 from their home equity, and just, taking a line of credit and buying a property in the Midwest with cash. And then what they would do is they would use the cash flow from that property to pay down the HELOC combined with their W-2 to pay off that house. Then what they would do is they would just tap into that HELOC again. They'd try to pay it off as quickly as possible and then buy their second house. And so now they have 2 homes that are basically receiving rental income, paying off that HELOC plus their W-2. And then the payoff period gets even smaller. And then you buy your third, and then the payoff period gets even smaller, right? And doing that over and over again. That was kind of the model that I wanted to use. But to be honest with you, Mike, it's a very successful model, and it's a place that I would recommend most people go if they're willing to take the risk once they're educated. That's the most important thing, is to start with the education. I took about, a year to a year and a half to figure out how to invest in real estate, especially out of state, because I knew that if I was investing in California, I was up against some headwinds with, landlord tenant laws. The cost was really high, and the cap rates, or basically the rental price, or the rental rate divided by the purchase price, was just way too low for it to make any sense. So I'd be deploying all this capital into a rental property that I would have to continue feeding it alongside of the tenant to feed the mortgage and all the expenses. So that was not an ideal place, and that comes with the education. So what I did, my very first property that I bought, Mike, out of state, was with an IRA. So I took my money from a previous employer, a previous 401k, and rolled it into a self-directed IRA. And so, if anyone out there in the audience has a previous employer or a 401k that's still with them, or still, maybe even rolled over into your new 401k, you may be able to take out that 401k from a previous employer and roll it into an IRA, or a self-directed IRA like Equity Trust or Advanta. But, I use Equity Trust, but there's a ton of them out there that you should do your research on. And basically, you can direct that money to either go into any stock in the open market that you want to, or you can buy commodities or businesses. You can write notes, to people. You can lend out money through your IRA to people and make a return off of being a lender. Or you can buy real estate, that's what I did. And that was what I had to do to start to get people to seriously notice me, Mike, because here I am. I'm a guy from California. I'm talking to these brokers and these agents in Indiana, right? And they're like, "Who are you?" And what I had to do is I had to fly out to Indiana. This is after I got really, really good in understanding where I could buy, right? I did some underwriting. I understood how it all worked and who I needed to contact. So I made a list of property managers that I could reach out to. And I flew to Indy and scheduled appointments to go talk to them. And when I talked to them and showed them, "Hey guys, look, I have $100,000 in my Roth IRA. I want to be able to deploy that into some property here. And there's more where that came from, because here's my income and I really want to build a portfolio." And so that's pretty much how it started, Mike, is I went over there with a serious intention, with education, armed with knowledge to be able to say, when I enter this conversation with property managers, I know what they're going to ask. I know that they're going to be looking for criteria from me. Here's what I want. I want to buy a house that's $100,000, under $100,000, that's at the 1% rule, which means it's $1,000 of rental income per month in these areas, or, open to talking about that. I had one or two top criteria because I did my homework. And you'd be surprised the attention that you get with people when you have that intention. So starting out with single families, it was the way for me. But looking back, that second part of your question, I think trusting other people would have been probably better for me, because if I had gone down the passive income route, I would have avoided some of the headaches that were to await me, basically in the single family space, and really start trusting other operators and knowing how they do apartment buildings, and learning that space sooner. That would have gotten me into the world of multifamily, where people, work together, they trust each other, and they bring capital together, and they do joint ventures where even though I may not be good at calling people and doing maintenance calls and figuring out rehab costs and negotiating and stuff like that, I'm good at underwriting numbers and I make a high salary. So if I can find someone else to partner with that kind of fits in those missing puzzle pieces for me, then the amount of leverage that you can do is much, much higher, because my time would have been wasted trying to do some of those things I didn't want to do in building a single family portfolio, which was talking with contractors and getting rehab estimates. And I hated that stuff, right? I liked the acquisition. I liked, buying the properties and having the money for it. But if I could partner with someone else to help make that friction just go away, then I would have been probably 3 times as large as I am right now. That's just an estimate. And that's a conservative one, given the scale of multifamily and the way that that goes. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if you have any other follow-ups.
Yeah, I have a couple follow-ups. So my first follow-up on this, again, a little tactical. When you borrow against the self-directed IRA, I had this conversation with Chris Larson on the show about using cash value whole life insurance, borrow against the whole life and policy. That way it grows inside the policy while also being deployed. And then you just reimburse yourself. And that way it's still growing inside the policy while also working its working capital elsewhere. Is it similar in that sense where when you take the money out of the IRA, direct it towards the real estate, it's not, is it still growing inside that IRA, or is it gone from the IRA? It's not growing at the market rate. It's just being deployed. And then if you want to put it back in, you put it back in. Again, a little bit of a tactical question, but you just kind of piqued my curiosity because that's a strategy I do. I use the whole life strategy with insurance, but I haven't done it with any of our IRAs.
Yeah. So as far as I know, I'm not an expert in the space, but essentially what I've done is I just bought properties with cash in there. And some of the most successful things that we've done is we just buy flips inside there, like especially with the Roth IRA, because if you're going to hold a property for a long period of time, like you miss out on some of those tax benefits by keeping it inside of the IRA. When it's owned there, you don't get any write-offs, and there's no mortgage, or at least there's no mortgage allowed, basically, unless you are partnering with someone. So one other thing that you could do is maybe you can do 50% ownership with your IRA, and then another 50% ownership with your whole life policy or something else, some sort of creative type of structure there. But basically, my understanding is that and again, you need to talk with a tax professional because there are rules there with like the at length. I think there's like an at length transaction, like it's a prohibited transaction. Like you can't, for instance, I can't deploy my Roth IRA money with my mom or my children involved in that property at all. Like that would disqualify that transaction because you're kind of commingling funds and there's like a conflict of interest. It's like an IRA. It's like there is something in the IRS code that allows for it. So you have to be careful, but you can partner with yourself, I believe. So if you put cash down and then you put in some money with your retirement account, you can be like 50-50 owner. I've seen that done before, so I know that is possible without having any conflict.
But you're actually taking the funds out of the retirement account and putting in the property, and there's no penalty on that taking the money from the retirement account.
Yeah, if it's self-directed, the only difference is that your self-directed retirement account becomes the owner on record, not you. So what it ends up happening is on title, it'll say, it'll say Mike A, FBO, or actually it would say like Equity Trust Company for business of Mike A, 100% IRA. That would be the name on title. It would be clearly a retirement account that's on title.
And is the goal then eventually to put say you took 50,000 away from the IRA, is to put the 50,000 back inside that IRA, or is the goal to just continue using those funds in real estate and just keeping it into real estate?
Yeah, that's exactly the idea. If you have a large enough portfolio inside of your IRA, you can continue to build your portfolio out that way, or you can use those funds to then basically be a lender on a different property. Like you can become a private note person. It's basically how you would build up any kind of cash account, essentially, because that's really the way that you have to think about it, is that I have a certain body of cash that I'm going to deploy into real estate or into some sort of investment or commodity or stock or whatever. And once you have that deployed, obviously you can't touch that, right? With the whole life, I know that you can leverage a little bit and you can pull some money out of that property, right, and use it for other things. But inside of inside of the IRA, it's basically there inside that property. So the only way to really unlock that would be either to sell it or restructure it to bring in someone else to basically pay, like take over half of the equity or something like that to pay back.
I see. So if I understood that right, it has to be parked inside of that property. So it's not actually cash. It's like I'm using it as leverage for that one property specifically. And it's kind of like, instead of it being locked into the IRA, it's locked into that property.
Yes, that's right. There are products out there. There are products out there that I think you can do that allows you to basically get a loan on your IRA money, like I believe, but it's very expensive. And then you also open yourself up to this thing called UBIT, which is unrelated business income taxes, which basically means that, hey, whatever you're doing, like because there are other funds that have been associated with a purchase or with some sort of, material investment inside of your IRA, because there's some outside involvement, that is not tax-free. So, because remember, everything that your retirement account invests in is tax free, because the point is it's either tax deferred or you've already paid the taxes on it, right? With the Roth IRA or a regular IRA. And so if you bring in funds from an outside source, which is a loan, or from like, that's not related to your equity stake, right? Because if you do like, 50% equity reduction, then that's okay. That you don't have to worry about that. But if you bring in like a loan or some external money, then the government's going to want you to pay taxes on that external stake that came in that took ownership alongside of your equity, if that makes sense.
So here's the thing. I am loving this because, again, I have a business that produces cash flow. And then that cash flow, I want to deploy and allow that cash to produce more cash. And that is the strategy of essentially build a business that I could have time freedom from. And then that business creates money. And then that money creates more money. And then that extra cash creates more freedom, right? So that way we eventually get to a point where we can live off of our passive income, and the business is no longer the source for our monthly expenses. It's the passive income that's covering that monthly expense. So I'd like to kind of take a little bit of a pivot into this time freedom piece, where it's like, okay, I got the passive income thing coming, but I got to properly offload tasks. I got to delegate properly. I got to make sure that things are getting done the right way. We have one of our clients that use our virtual assistant services. His virtual assistant team is going out researching mobile home parks, doing the research, finding the inventory on the market for him. And then he has somebody else call these people and then set up appointments. So that way Matt can go out and have the conversation with these mobile home park owners to see if there's a way for him to like close the deal on the back end. But he has properly delegated to his virtual assistants to do the research and the admin and the data entry into the computer. And then he has somebody else as like an setter or a qualifier. So he's only doing the let me have the conversations. That as an example for the listener to say, that's an example of how Matt has created a little bit of time freedom from the front end of the prospecting process. I'd like to hear you riff on any processes or any delegation that has shown up for you to create some of this time freedom from the operational side of the business, or the marketing side, or the prospecting side, or anything that shows up for you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. We talk a lot about freedom, on our podcast, and also, with just living our life in general, because we're really passionate about location freedom, time freedom, and financial freedom, and we kind of hit on all three of these today on this podcast, except for time freedom, which is one of the most important ones, I would argue, because a lot of people think about different things when it comes to freedom. Like location freedom, that can be done with a W-2. You can still be locationally free while working a W-2, and that's kind of what we got when we started our journey. Is we broke free from having to be in an office or being in a physical location. And then, ironically enough, Mike, we actually became financially free by becoming locationally free, because when we were locationally free, we were able to have more control over our expenses. We could live in areas that we wanted to live in, and that allowed us to put ourselves in a situation where our income from our properties exceeded our current financial status, right? Or where we're with our passive income. But the time freedom is the most important thing, because what good is it if you're in Europe on the beach and you're chained to your computer because you have this business that you can't really go out and enjoy anything. You've just bought yourself a job, right? So it's really important that we're talking about this. And I just want to give that context because it's super important for people listening. And for us, there's a few things that we do that's very special. I would say that, like, as an operator of multifamily, I think that asset management is really important, and being able to have real-time data coming in that's either available to us to help make decisions based on how things are working on the income side or on the expense side. And then also for reporting to investors, for visibility and transparency, so they can see how their investment is operating at a real-time basis, not quarterly look back, not yearly, like how did we do? By then it's too late, right? Like, in order to make some of these decisions, you have to know them. So What we have, Mike, is we also have a team of VAs that we've trained up, and we use Asana to help like manage all of their tasks. So it's very easy to see what they have on their plate at any one time. We have automated tools. We use Otter for everything, Otter.ai. We use that to like record all of our Zoom calls. So any Zoom call that I have with either an investor or with a team member, it's recorded and transcribed. And depending on where it's stored, everyone has access to them. So that's also for protection from 506B, 506C investments, which I'm sure you know about as well. That's also to help like show that there is a conversation and a track record of of a conversation.
I
And
do
then
not know the 506Bs. Forgive my ignorance on
okay,
that topic.
okay,
Just
no
listener,
worries.
just so you know, I'm not that intelligent.
No,
So
no, it's
I could
okay.
I could have taken the compliment though. I could have taken it, but I
It's
couldn't
okay.
in integrity to
No,
sit
no,
there and
it's
be like,
okay.
yeah, I'm smart.
But no, it's all good. But I was just gonna say that like we have systems set up for everything. So and we really like technology and automation. We're using that with our CRM, obviously. But in order, like the other thing that we do is podcasts, right? I have it down to a point now where I'm sure you do as well, Mike, where all I need to do is take a recording and just basically notify them, which I'm even working on an automation of getting, once a recording is done, having a Zap plugged in to send them an email or send them a Slack message that says, hey, this recording is done. Go ahead and drop a task up on the board, schedule it for the next slot, right? And I have a spreadsheet that basically is AI powered with Google in Google Sheets, where it's connected with ChatGPT on the back end. So that anytime a cell is modified, it takes a prompt and runs it through the ChatGPT API and throws out what the intro text would be, or what the social media text would be, that type of thing. But it's crazy because this ecosystem is changing so much. Like I've just joined Riverside, which is how we're actually recording this podcast. And on Riverside, they provide a lot of those tools already. So some of the things that I've been building on the back end have already been kind of like, as things change, things are getting better and better. So I always love that stuff. And we're always talking about like getting more and more efficient. And so it's always a conversation, an ongoing conversation. And so we're very systems oriented, because without having those systems of having real-time financial data being populated in, and then also having our communications being very streamlined and efficient with our partners and with our team, it would just be impossible for us to keep control of everything that's going on here within a reasonable amount of time. So I would say, Mike, that on an average week, we spend about maybe 2 to 3 hours per day on our business. So however we want to spend that, whether it's, one day, a day and a half, like working really hard, like an 8 to 10 hour day, like doing that twice, 2 days a week, or doing 3 hours a day on our business, we have full control of our time now when it comes to that. And even those things are just new projects. But we already have like an operating system that kind of keeps us moving. And so, we pretty much have found ourselves in this time freedom place, which is really great. And we're very fortunate to be able to have that.
This is a lot of what we talk about on the show and in our inside of our operator owner community. So I want to park here for just a couple of minutes. So this is really great, Derek. Great stuff. The follow-up questions that I have is, when you say 2 to 3 hours on the business as an owner, as a founder, a lot of people listen to this say, I have a tough time letting go of control of a lot of the things that are in the business in order for me to work on the business. And we preach to them all the time. Dan Martell's buy back your time, right? Let go of control of the low value tasks so that way you could take control of the high value tasks. So when someone hears you doing 2 to 3 hours a day on average on high value activities, what are some of those high value activities that you as a founder and an owner are spending your time on and investing your time on? And then what are, if you would be vulnerable and willing to share, what are some of those low level activities that you had a tough time letting go of control of and delegating and offloading to competent people or competent technology or AI that you're like, it's not going to be as good as me. I can't let this go, but I know it's not worth my time. So if you can give us a scope of that, that'd be great.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for this. I would say for me, some of the high value things that I do are content creation, things that have to come from my own voice. That's one. The other thing that comes from me is investor communication and new projects. So if I'm talking with investors, people want to talk with me directly, right? And that makes sense. And that's what I want. I'd like to speak directly with investors or with potential people that want to learn more. And then new projects like starting up new parts of a website or like doing a new meetup group or something like that. Those are all things that have not been figured out yet that deserves my attention. And if I feel like there's a need for it, those are kind of like those high value activities that I feel are high leverage, right? Like, there's something that if you do 20% of the work, you're going to get 80% of the results for the business in general. And those are things that I look for in making that distinction. Some of the low value.
Just to click on that, just want to make sure I connect on that. So strategy, which is the new projects, sales, which is new investor prospects that I want to convert into a new someone I'm doing business with. So that's really like sales. And then content creation is creating a value for my current audience and my followers. So that way they want to continue to listen to me. So adding value to my audience, sales and converting prospects into new clients or investors, and strategy for new projects that are coming in. So that way we can continue to be on the cutting edge and growing our business. If I understood that right, I just want to make sure.
That's right. Yeah. And there are ways to do this, Mike, where it's, you can make it very personal, but not have it be a complete, block on all of your time. Like for instance, the one way that I would do this, like for investor communication, if someone reaches out to us and signs up for our newsletter or they come across this, they basically enter our CRM. I have a task or I have basically a automation on the back end that gives me a note inside of Asana that I need to welcome this person in. And so what I will do is I will record a Loom video at just 30 seconds, really quick, right? And then I'll take that video and I'll basically message it to them within the first 48 hours they sign up with us, right? And that personal touch, it only takes 30 seconds of my time and I can batch it, right? Like I can do it while I'm outside walking, right? While I'm exercising. As long as there's a system for it where it pops up every time and I know what to do, it becomes something very easy and enjoyable for me because I've had that system behind me to support me so that when people see it, it helps with our, with people to get to know me. And it's a little personal touch that impresses people, right? So things like that, thinking of systems like that help, with conversion and help with like just getting people to know who I am in general, that's always a better thing too. And it shows that I'm willing to reach out and give the personal touch to someone. So that would be a high level thing that I need to do, right? Because it's me.
And what you're doing is you're still doing the high level thing and you built in a system to allow it to take a reduction of time. So you're leveraging tech, really in this case, technology, to reduce the amount of time that it takes for you. So it only takes that 30 seconds or 60 seconds in between things because you built out this if-then sequence in your mind and then put that into technology. And that's something we talk about all the time in our operator owner program is thinking in the systems, if-then process thinking, because there's always going to be a tech solution. We just need to figure out what is the solution for your business. And then if you can dream it, you can build it. I absolutely love that, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Keep going.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that the other parts, that we were talking about in the previous question was what are the low things or what are some of the things that we've delegated away or have, where we struggled with that. I will say, for me, it's social media and we have a system right now with social media where we batch everything. We basically do about 3 or 4 months worth of content at one time, Mike. And then we take the content and we basically make 50, 60 posts and then we scramble them. We take the posts and then we post like post number 1 on LinkedIn is day 1, right? But post number 2 may be day 42 on Facebook. And so when we scramble them, most people have kind of like this, a short-term memory, I would say. And so what you show to someone one week, they'll forget if they see it in a different platform the next week. So we might as well use some of that content to impress people. Because I've seen so many times, Mike, where like people push out social media and it's the same post everywhere. And that kind of like, I don't know why that irritates me a little bit. It just seems like spammy, right? But if you can show that you're actually creating content and different content, all the platforms, that's a huge value add. So someone will notice those types of things, right? like it maybe not right away, but they will notice it in the first couple of months while following you, or while they're trying to build a relationship with you. If they just entered your newsletter, or if they just found you online somewhere, I feel like that's a small little touch that can help. And my struggle was letting that go. Like what content are they seeing, and instead trusting what my assistants can do to help me get that content out there. So for instance, right, what I do, and this is just a little hack, so for those out there who have their own businesses, including you, Mike, this is what I do. I'll go on social media, right, and I'll just hit Loom, I'll hit record on Loom, and I'll just start talking about what I see in my feed, because I have a ton of people that have some excellent stuff in my LinkedIn feed or in my Instagram feed or whatever, because I'm connected with commercial real estate professionals, other entrepreneurs, things like that. So I see some cool stuff up there, right? So if I see a post that I really like as I'm scrolling and I've got the screen recording on, I'll just stop and start talking about it. I'll start talking about why I really like that post. And in this day and age, why couldn't you take the transcript of what you were talking about for that post and run it through a well-worded ChatGPT prompt to basically create a draft of a social media post? All that's left is having a team member who's very talented when it comes to visual design to basically take what's on the screen and repurpose it, to rebrand it to what you have and match it along with the message that you have been relaying along, right? With that message, with that post. So that's what we do, right? Is I take a 2 hour long video or an hour long video of me just sitting down and looking through my feed, right? And we turn that into 60 posts, right? So all that is, and this is how people need to think about their time freedom, right? If you have a system in place where you have the prompt ready for someone, or you have an instructional video for how they would do this, and again, it always needs to be what you would do if you were in their shoes, because that's ultimately what they need when you're paying someone, less than $10 an hour. They need the step-by-step process so that they can eventually do it. And once you give them a video of you doing it one time with one post, end to end, tip to tail, right? That is leverageable. That's scalable. That becomes an SOP. And so that's something that, I learned the hard way, because I went through this process with my podcast production, which I do in-house. And I do that with my social media. And those were the two things I struggled with the most, Mike, was letting go of that process. And I realized that because I was doing it the same way over and over again, why am I having a problem delegating it when I know what the result's going to be if it's done right? So why can't I just flip on a Loom video and watch, myself record it? And then I can take that video and A, let them basically run with the process from there. And then B, document the process in a way that's easy for them. So it becomes an SOP in case they move on, right? And we have another VA step in behind them. So, again, I think I covered a lot of ground there, and hopefully I didn't confuse anyone. But that's kind of the process that we went through with our social media and our podcasting.
Yeah, crushing it, Derek. And for those listeners, buy back your time. Dan Martell calls that the camcorder method, and he calls it playbooks. So SOPs he calls playbooks. Camcorder method is just record yourself doing a thing. What Derek is talking about here is taking something that only Derek can really do, but then him doing what's in his genius, and then allowing the team and the technology to support something that only Derek can do. I absolutely love that. My version of that, I'm going to steal that a little bit. I'm going to borrow intelligently, I say. My version of that is I do Facebook Live. So I'll just click record. I'll do a Facebook Live, and then my team downloads that video for my social and then chops it up, turns it into posts, I send them, I have a whole library of photos they pull from the photo library, turn it into captions. And like, that's my version of that. But I like your idea, which is let me go look and consume some other people's content for inspiration to see what's relevant, and then add my spin to whatever it is that they're offering. Because we talk about in our community, there's two types of people on social. There's consumers and there's producers. And what Derek is talking about, there are producers of content that could inspire you for you to produce your content as well, which I really love. So you don't have to scroll aimlessly consuming everyone's BS of like how they have what they had for dinner. Yeah. It's consuming content to get inspired to create new content as a producer. If I heard that right, Derek.
Yeah. One other thing I would add to that too, Mike, is that when you're going through other people's content, you can also see what resonates and what is getting traction. Because if you see what's something on your feed and you see people responding to that, right? That's social proof that that thing that you're going to be talking about is important and meaningful to someone.
Great point, man. Derek, that's awesome. I'm glad we went there. Um, is there anything else that we did not hit on today that you want to make sure we capture in this episode before we
Yeah,
go to our final three questions, please?
there is. Thank you, sir. So the other thing that before we start wrapping up here is my wife. She has been the most important thing in my career. She's been supportive throughout this whole thing and actually has encouraged me to leave my job and help me get to where I am together. So if you're in a position where you think you're like doing this alone and you have a spouse or you have a fiance or someone that you're seriously considering within your life and your family, and they're not on board, you have to get them on board first. And I hate to go all the way back to like basics, but this is really important because I just want you to picture, for instance, those who are out there that are working a full-time job or you have a business and now you're trying to like invest in income. If you say to yourself that investing in income producing real estate or other investments that cash flow is going to be totally passive or doesn't take any time or doesn't affect anyone except for you in a negative way, you're wrong. Because if you take $50,000 and go deploy it into a syndication or into some other cash flow investment somewhere else, right? Yes, that's $50,000 that maybe will be passive, maybe it won't be. But that's $50,000 that could have been spent elsewhere. Your wife could probably be, maybe she wants a car. Maybe she needs a new car. Maybe she needs some tools. Maybe she wants to have some comfort, that sense of security. Maybe going in and just saying having $50,000 in the bank account is important to them, but not to you. Or having, the difference between having 100K in savings versus 50K makes your partner feel uncomfortable. It does affect them. So starting with the basics of understanding, getting your spouse or your significant other to be on your team to help support you with whatever cash flow venture you're doing, so that they're an active and positive and they're helpful. They're being a helpful involvement in all of this is absolutely key. And then you need someone to be able to bounce ideas off of, or if you're having a hard time, they'll be there to support you. But if they're not in agreement with what you're doing, you won't have that. And it may drive a stake between you and wedge you out even further from where you are. So I just think that that's super important. And your spouse usually has a superpower that you don't have. And there is no one else on the planet that wants more success for you than your spouse outside of yourself. So use that, right? Use your spouse's superpower somehow, right? Get them involved, get them excited, and tell them what you're doing and teach them. The more you teach them, the more you're going to be able to understand yourself and teach others. And that's how true value goes. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that was an important step for me and a turning point in my investing career, is when she became a part of the whole thing.
That's great. So shout out to Sophie. And is she still practicing naturopathic as a naturopathic doctor?
Oh yeah. She's doing it all remotely, and I'm really proud of what she's doing because she's, it's important. Our health is super, super important, and it's always one of our pillars. And I'm sure, I don't know if you talked with Chris Larson about this, but he's really big on health. Health is like one of that fourth degree of freedom, which is you have time, money, and location. But then you also have health that you have to worry about as well, because if you don't have health, then all of the other things don't matter either. So.
I agree. Chris is. I was just a guest on Next Level Income, and we had a great conversation. I believe that kind of worked its way in. That's because my identity is healthy CEO dad. So that's one of those identity pieces. Derek, this is awesome. Really, really great stuff. I would love, I know the audience is going to want to stay in touch, but before we give them how to stay in touch with you, we like to ask every guest 3 questions. These could be short hitting, whatever comes top of mind for you. The first question is, what do you think the world needs most today?
I think people today, patience is what the world needs most. I mean, love is like obviously something that's on the top of my mind right now, but I think a more specific form of love, I think, would be patience and the willingness to listen to each other, even if we disagree. There's a lot of that out there. I think that we need in this world, and listening, learning, having patience. Like the people that are getting into power these days in the United States and in the world, and even that are starting to make decisions, are millennials and Gen Zers. And we grew up with the internet, or we started to grow up with the internet. And the internet is a place for quick answers and finding exactly what you need in the blink of an eye. And some answers don't come that quickly. And so I just wish that people would take some time to think for themselves, and listen to other people, because you may not always be right. And that mentality set me back about 10 years, because I had an opportunity to invest in real estate like 20 years ago and I didn't do it. And for that, I'm paying for that right now. I mean, everything is all good anyway, but I just realized like what my potential would have been if I had a little bit more of an open mind and more patience with myself and others.
It's a great answer. Thanks, Derek. The second question we like to ask is, what are 1 to 3 books that you think people should read?
Okay. The One Thing is amazing because it helps you focus on intention and how to get your goals basically accomplished. And then on the tactical side, I would say Atomic Habits. So I'm sure you've heard of these already. And then either The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan to help you with mindset, where, if you're struggling with, anything in your business or anything in your personal life, that is such a fantastic book to help reset your mindset. Or the Who and Not How, or Who
Yeah.
Not How. That's what that is. Who Not How is also an amazing book, which I'm sure you can relate with given your agency, right?
Derek, man, we just became even closer friends. I, on my shelf, I got The One Thing right here. I got Who Not How right here, Gap in the Gain right here, and then Atomic Habits is it's somewhere down here.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean, great books, awesome choices, and
Amazing.
I don't know exactly where this conversation goes offline, but I'm really excited to continue it, Derek.
Same.
The third question that we like to ask every guest is, what does it mean to you to be better than rich?
Well, I know that you've probably gotten this so many times already, because I'm sure the word freedom comes up quite a lot when you get this answer. And I hate to be cliche to give you that answer also, but I really think that being intentional in freedom, like life design, understanding where you want to be, that's the most important thing. Because there are so many rich people out there, Mike, that just aren't happy because they don't have intention, they don't have design, they haven't thought things through. Like they're just kind of in this place that they've either fell into or that they were given, and it wasn't something they had to work for. And so I think it's all about design and keeping the 3 degrees of freedom and also health in mind as well. So making sure that you've got location freedom, you are where you want to be physically. And then you've got time freedom. So you have systems stepping in for you. And then you have the financial freedom to enjoy and go travel or do whatever it is that you want to do with your lifestyle and make changes or make an impact. I think those 3 things with freedom and just intentional what to do with those freedoms and your life design, that's the most important thing.
That's great. I appreciate that, Derek. Where can people stay in touch with you if they wanted to learn more? I know you mentioned your podcast. I know you have your book as well. Where can people stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so people can find me easily on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. Like to respond to people directly and put lots of great content out there. And also we have our podcast, which is called The 3 Degrees of Freedom. No surprises. And then for those who want to know whether or not they're ready to invest in real estate at all, either if it's active or passive, meaning if you want to buy single family homes on your own, or you want to start working with like multifamily operators, go to elevateequity.org/podcast gift, one word. And we have a great interactive PDF that we put together that helps walk you through all of that.
Super helpful. Yeah, thank you. And I know we didn't mention it, but you also have your book, Part-Time Real Estate Investing for Full-Time Professionals. So I'm assuming that's on Amazon if they wanted to pick that up. Is it also on your website, the elevateequity.org?
It is. I encourage people who are looking to make the jump to do that. That book is half mindset and half tactics. And like true schedules, like how long it took me to buy my first property and how long it took me to do my second property. And like, I'm a PM and an engineer, so you kind of get the benefit of both of those worlds from me when I write that book.
Well, listener, check everything Derek is offering out. Be sure to go take a look at his podcast, 3 Degrees of Freedom Show. And assuming you love it, give him a rating, give him a review. And Derek, just thank you so much for your wisdom today. And as always, listener, thank you for supporting the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, thanks. That way you could see all the books that I was mentioning. If you're on Spotify, Apple, we obviously always appreciate you over there as well. And for those of you that don't know, something that Andrew Biggs, my business partner, and I are doing is we have a couple of different promotions that we're doing right now for our AI-powered virtual assistant services. So if you got inspired from anything that Derek is sharing right now and would like to have a conversation, we are offering a free 90-day delegation plan. And what we'll do is we'll show you exactly sit down with you, with myself or someone on our team, and show you how to map out your time freedom and delegation plan for the next 90 days. You could go to betterthanrich.com/slash 90-day plan. And that's something new that we just started doing because we want people to experience that time freedom on the other side of, as Derek said, being rich. So thank you so much, Derek. Thank you, listener. And until next time, as always, leave today better than you found it. And until next week, have a great day. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at betterthan_rich and join our Facebook group at the Better Than Rich Show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, leave today better than you found it.